6.5%, was it? Is that what the current odds are of the Stanley Cup?
Well, and if you look at the round-by-round progression, the Stanley Cup favorite is the Vancouver Canucks.
What a time to be alive!
Talking you through every goalie controversy, scoring slump, and draft lottery bust, this is the C4 Podcast on CanucksHockeyBlog.com. Here they are, the best starting lineup we could afford under the salary cap. Chris, Matt, Anna, and Adam.
Welcome to another episode of the C4 Canucks Hockey Podcast, brought to you by Anna and Chris. I'm Chris, she's Anna. How you doing, Anna?
Yeah, I am doing pretty good. The sun is shining. I have a very loud cat for company, so if he appears on the podcast, just know no cats were harmed in the making of this podcast.
This is like going retro, because when this podcast first started, Clay and I would record in my living room, and on occasion, one of my cats would come and make her presence known on occasion. So, I mean, this is full circle, different cat experience.
Yeah, I am at Brennan's share Annalise's place and looking after her cat Harvey, who is just a very loud boy, but he's very cute, so we forgive him.
Well, okay.
How are you?
I shall. I'm okay. I mean, all things considered, a little stressed for reasons we'll get into in the show. Went car shopping, did not come home with a car. So, I mean, yeah. I
mean, I would say that's, obviously not successful, but it's kind of a big decision to make. You can't just wing that.
It is. And the funny thing about the experience is that I have sort of found my mind set on what I kind of want, but I'm being practical in regards to whether or not I've allowed myself to fully explore options before having my mind set on something. So like I think back to 15 years ago when we bought our last car, we didn't go out there to buy a car. We went out there to look, and we left with a car. Right. Like there was absolutely no looking. We needed a car.
Good length of time, so.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it was a good car. It had really no issues until it decided life was over and it would blow a head gasket on the highway. So, hey, them's the breaks. That said, the Vancouver Canucks over the past week have, toyed with our emotions a little, as they have been apt to do in this entire series, right? We recorded our last episode where the Vancouver Canucks had a 2-1 lead in the series, and we had revisited, our prognostications, and we still thought like, hey, there's an opportunity to be had here. And I was committed. Canucks in 7. Maybe not, but Canucks in 7.
Yeah.
Well, guess what, Anna? Here we are recording, and gosh darn it, that's the only way the Canucks are getting through this series. Spoiler alert, Canucks in 7.
Yeah, has to be, so we got to believe it to be the case.
That's right. We'll get into a quick recap of the 3 games that have taken place since we last recorded a show. We'll obviously do a quick preview on our thoughts of Game 7, which will be happening sometime today. I mean, I'm hoping you're listening to our episode before the actual game happens, because it is possible if you happen to listen after, our optimism or pessimism may be misplaced.
True.
Just saying. But no, there's that, and there's also some late breaking news that has come, to light that could impact the Canucks in one way, shape, or form. We'll get into that. And then we'll take a scan around the rest of the league, because this series is the only one left. The others, they've all got sorted out, and teams are kicking back old school, relaxing or whatever it is they do in their downtime before at least we know the East gets underway on Wednesday. So all of that and more. But first, we got to rewind. I guess before we actually rewind, we should probably talk about the late breaking news. If you have not heard, you're listening to our podcast episode right now, you've not heard the news, Brock Boeser is likely out of Game 7 due to a blood clotting issue. The team hasn't made an official statement. The news came out after the sort of team press conference where Tocchet tried to lighten the mood by saying Demko was starting, and legit had people in the room believing him for a matter of seconds before he's like, no, not at all.
Just wishful thinking.
But Brock Boeser not being in the lineup for what I could only imagine is a very serious issue. Like when you hear the terms blood clot issue, to me, that's not an issue you take lightly. I'm not a doctor. I don't know if you are, Anna, but from what I understand, blood clotting issue could go one of two ways. One, lots of clots, bad. Or two, no clots, bad.
Yeah. Both very, much on the serious end of the scale. So, obviously the first thing you just think of is, thoughts with Brock Boeser and his health, because you really think long-term health is very much the priority, and that's scary. I don't know how much he knows at this point, presumably more than we do, but I don't know if there's a full diagnosis or anything. But yeah, it's scary. So really hope he's okay, just as a person.
And more than that, I feel that if this has been an issue, because I'm not a doctor. Maybe you're a doctor, but I'm not a doctor. This has probably been something that has been going on for, I would imagine, more than 24 hours.
Yeah, that's the thing that always comes up. Whenever series wraps up and teams get out of the playoffs, it was this morning, I think we learned about Seth Jarvis, the Carolina Hurricane, who tore his shoulder weeks into the season and has been playing with that all season, which is crazy. Mm-hmm. But we're hearing about this in the middle of playoffs, and you just think, how long has this been going on? Is it an issue that they're just figuring out now? They knew it was an issue and now it's getting diagnosed. But you just think, hockey players' health is just monitored constantly. So you would think that at least something was known before this point.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to position this as if this is a team problem in regards to forcing a player to play or a player electing to play. I don't imagine an NHL team, and I really don't think a player would mess around with an issue such as blood clotting.
You would think,
whether it's because of clotting or a lack thereof. There are serious enough problems that you wouldn't just be like, I'll take a couple of those and call it a day. But again, I'm not a doctor.
But,
so what do I know?
And we've just seen some crazy injuries that people have played through that do affect long-term health. Broken sternum last year, Kachuk playing through that was insane. I know he skipped Game 7, but was playing through that initially. And I do think players and teams can be quite reckless, especially if they think they're a good group, and Brock Boeser's been playing very well. But hopefully something as serious as blood, any disorder around that is taken very seriously.
Yeah. Well, our best wishes obviously are with Brock Boeser, and we'll get into sort of how his loss will be felt within the context of the team in Game 7, and obviously as we look maybe beyond that. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about the week that was. So when we last spoke, there were some hijinks that took place, and I know there's probably some Oilers fans, if there are any, listening to our show saying, you call that hijinks? Okay. Connor McDavid ate Carson Soucy's stick. We talked about it in the last show. Did Carson Soucy plan on feeding stick to Connor McDavid? No, but Nikita Zadorov assisted in helping McDavid come down to stick level. Yeah. 1 game suspension ultimately was issued to Carson Soucy for the resulting play. The statement being that, that was not a hockey-related play that had happened at the end of the game, so therefore it needs to be punished severely. Interestingly enough, Zadorov ate stick too. There was a cross-check to his face, but that went unpunished. But again, I'm not I am not taking away from Susie's suspension. I thought that was fair.
Yeah, totally. I did too. I mean, he did not mean to cross-check Connor McDavid to the face, but he did mean to cross-check him, and like ultimately the danger was there, right? So I do think one game was totally fair. Zadorov got the 5K fine for his cross-check, but I don't think that either Zach Hyman or Connor McDavid should have been suspended. But yeah, I do think they should have been fined for those players as well. Because it was all part of the, context.
But with Susie out, Noah Juleson found himself inserted into the roster. Noah Juleson played not horrible. No. Maybe not great. But have you heard about this Edmonton Oilers power play, Anna?
I
don't know. Have we talked about it?
That's the reputation.
Yeah, and so, the Vancouver Canucks power play, not as hot. And unfortunately for the Vancouver Canucks, Edmonton doesn't so much worry when they take penalties, but the Vancouver Canucks shouldn't follow suit because Edmonton, or at least at the start of the week, Edmonton's still very good. JT Miller's interference penalty against Draisaitl, which arguably was Draisaitl's phenomenal sell job. I don't know how you call that interference. Like, how's it interference when a player snaps their head back? But regardless, JT goes to the box, and Draisaitl goes and scores a goal to put the Oilers up 1-0. And much like every game in this series, the Oilers go and exert some pressure, get that early goal, and functionally put the Canucks, behind the 8 ball. Edmonton, to their credit, also frustrated the Vancouver Canucks throughout that first period. Like, the Canucks just couldn't get anything going. And I think some of it was potentially a response to what had transpired, a couple nights before, both with Vancouver Canucks win and obviously the hijinks that ensued at the end of the game. But, fast forwarding to the second period, when Ryan Nugent-Hopkins scores late in the period, and it felt to me like, oh, man, like, Canucks had a better second, but still Edmonton looked like the team that wanted to win it. Like, this is just going to be back and forth series, isn't it?
Yeah, and it does feel like Canucks just lose concentration, and we'll see that later in the game and in later games, and we've just kind of seen it throughout. It's just like losing focus, which is definitely like a weak area of their game. And we should say, like, although the Canucks were playing better in the second, Edmonton also had a better goalie, because they did have Pickett in net instead of Stuart Skinner, and it seemed to be a good choice.
It was, and sure, as we get to here in the third period, the Vancouver Canucks came out with some renewed purpose under Operation Windeturd. And Connor Garland's goal, not only a beautiful snapshot, but one that I don't think Pickard should be faulted for. I mean, that goes through Skinner, who hadn't been entirely great up to this point and found his way on the bench. But when Dakota Joshua scores with, I think, with empty net, 18-19. I'm like, oh my God, this Canucks team cannot lose. We saw this against Nashville where they would be down, but not out. Like you just, there wasn't a means for this team to give up. Unfortunately, well, maybe they didn't give up. They forgot there was still a minute left in the third. Yeah.
I mean, I remember sitting at the end of the game before, or just thinking, when Edmonton got that 3-2 goal, and I was like, 76 seconds is a long time. That's a really long time still for Edmonton to tie up. Thank God they didn't in that game. But yeah, it's a minute 40-ish. Like, that's a long time in hockey. But at the same time, if you just tied it up, concentrate for 2 more minutes. That's all you got to do.
Well, at least to get it to overtime, where there are no guarantees. But the problem is that the Vancouver Canucks seem to have this whole panic mentality near the end of every game when they're holding on to a lead. this has been consistent in the playoffs this season. And this was no different. Edmonton came in knowing that they didn't want it to go to overtime. Like, I kind of felt like Edmonton didn't want this game to go Vancouver's way, giving Vancouver a 3-1 series lead going back to Vancouver. Like, they didn't want that. Right. And so Evan Bouchard's goal seals the deal. And it came off of a scrambled Vancouver Canucks effort. And like, how do you even let that happen?
Yeah, I mean, JT obviously was the one that took the blame for it. Like, he was the one that sent the apology text. Rick Tocchet the next day, he did blow the zone, but...
Okay, a little off the rails. Of all the players in the Vancouver Canucks, do you think JT Miller is the type to be sending apology texts? Like, would you have guessed it was JT?
Honestly, yes, because he's so honest to a fault that he's just like...
Well, I'm not saying he wouldn't apologize, but by sending it like the text. Like, to me, he's not the text type.
Oh, I suppose. Yeah, like the fact that he even owns a phone. Like, to me, honestly.
Well, I'm sure he owns a phone, but it just doesn't seem to be the texting type. Anyhow, that's just my 2 cents.
Mm-hmm. But I do think, yeah, like, obviously, he is very honest about his own play there. Yeah, it was great, but, like, and he also, I think that's a valid criticism. I do think, like, he's not the only one. Like, Evan Bouchard was completely all alone there, and there's a few people that failed their duties there, so, yeah. I do think that's a really weak moment. Like, minute and a half left, that's pretty unacceptable, I think, all around.
It is. I agree. I mean, I think if we go back to game 2, when Edmonton won in overtime, if Edmonton had won overtime here, okay, you did what you could, you got it to overtime, it didn't work out. What do you need to fix? You need to fix your slow start. But when you have a slow start and you can't wrap it up in the end, that's 2 things you got to fix, and it starts to split your focus. So Edmonton gets game 4, ties it up 2-2, comes back to Vancouver. And if, one were to argue that there needs to be an assignment of momentum, I'd have to think Edmonton's got a little of it. I wasn't feeling so good about this game back at home, game 5. Well, Vancouver apparently got a memo that said slow starts are bad, okay? And came out and just right from the first whistle decided that they wanted to win game 5. Yeah, the first period was back and forth. Yes, Edmonton came out of the period with a 2-1 lead. Yes, Carson Soucy's ties it up 17-27. Vancouver Canucks decide to give the fourth line of the Oilers some plaudits, and Matthias Jarmark scores to take the lead back. But Vancouver came out hitting, shooting, and carried the play for the most part. I don't know what happened in the second period, but it's like Edmonton was almost intimidated by what was happening. Like, I don't know if it was the crowd. I don't know if it was the team. I don't know if just Vancouver found their early season gameplay and packaged it up. But for the longest time, Edmonton, I think, had one shot throughout the period while the Canucks were peppering puck after puck after puck after puck. And, I'm discounting the fact that the Vancouver Canucks also were trying to do Edmonton a solid by taking every possible penalty there was known to man in the first period. The automatic penalties, the less than automatic penalties, the bad penalties.
Yeah, I will say, like, in terms of coming out firing, like, from the morning skate when we saw the sort of line change up, I thought, like, yes, I am excited. This is it. Like, I do think this is huge. Like, PD getting better line mates. Because I will say, like, the whole PD narrative, I was getting a bit sick of the, like, I'm not, giving Pedersen complete pass here, but the fact that people would say that he needs to earn better line mates, I thought was kind of insane. Like, this is the playoffs. That's cutting off your nose to spite your face. Like, You just gotta.
Well, he signed a big contract, and gosh darn it, he just doesn't deserve it quite yet.
Yeah, I thought that was truly insane. And thinking yes, he needs to play better, but it's not divorced from his line mates at all. Like, maybe that's the starting point. Anyway.
Yeah, he got Höglander and Lindholm.
Yeah.
Right, and we know that he's got some chemistry with Höglander, and I think Lindholm being on his line allowed for him to no longer be the center and play a little more in the peripheral. He had a good game. In fact, he's a goon, as we learned. Yes. Did you know that you can get a charging penalty when another player skates into you only because you happen to jump up like an inch? Like, it wasn't like, this is when, okay. First of all, Di Giuseppe scores unassisted. Edmonton makes a mistake. Not delivery, it's Di Giuseppe. But late in the second period, Vancouver is on a power play. The power play is actually looking pretty good. And Petey goes and plays the puck back, like a drop pass. I think it was to Quinn. And I think was it Fogel or Janmark? I can't remember which of the two. Skates towards Petey to hit him. And what does he do? He just jumps a bit. The referees call a penalty. And if you read the rule, it does say if a player jumps. But the problem is the context around the rule is about there needing to be distance traveled. And so the only thing I could think of is it was because Petey jumped. Are they saying he had a 5 foot, vertical and therefore he traveled distance? Like even Edmonton couldn't understand what the penalty was. And then I thought, okay, well, maybe he got his elbow up and stick. Maybe a softer call, but at this point in time, Edmonton had been whistled a couple of times in the period, how game management happens to be. But yeah,
yeah, I mean, it's always bad when the screenshots of the rulebook come out. I know that was coming out.
Well, I saw someone make a comment like, when Ron McLean can't defend the referees, it's not a good call.
Exactly. I mean, I know the screenshots of the rulebook came out in the Boston, Florida series. And even though, they were right to complain about it, goaltender interference is just voodoo, as we know. But, yeah.
No. Well, I mean, Chris Knobloch was asked after Game 6. Or was it Game 6? Anyhow, he was asked as to why he didn't challenge. And he's like, after seeing the game the night before in Dallas, there ain't no way I was going to go and, take a penalty there.
And it's true. Rick Tocchet also didn't challenge what you could read as goaltender interference as well. So, but yeah, I think that was some truly insane takes, that Petey deserved that penalty. There was just a few, rough calls, and I would say even in the game, in Game 6, you could say there was a lot of soft calls as well, but this isn't a soft call. This was a call. Soft calls is okay, you did the thing.
We still don't know what Petey did other than he did jump. And if you're going to call a charge because a player jumped, well, let me tell you, there's probably a lot of mischarging calls throughout the season.
That's the thing. You have to say,
jumping happens.
Have you ever seen this called this way in the regular season? No. No. That's the context.
Anyhow.
Anyway, yes.
Vancouver seemed to be aggrieved by this, and it almost, gave their penalty kill confidence. Edmonton has now, to this point, scored pretty much at will on the power play. And in Game 5, how many power play goals did Edmonton get? 0. Yeah, and the Vancouver Canucks arguably had some pretty solid opportunities shorthanded. That said, we go into the third period. Edmonton has settled down. The Vancouver Canucks now seem to be in uncharted territory and unsure how to maintain that, high level of play, at least until near to the end of the third period, when suddenly they come to the realization that going to overtime is kind of scary against a team like the Oilers. But regardless of this, I had sort of resigned myself that OT was going to happen. I didn't want to go OT because I was like, if Vancouver makes a mistake, Edmonton will make them pay. I just don't have a good feeling. So who is it that took the shot from the the sideboards? Do you recall?
Into PD?
Yeah. Was it Lindholm? It was Lindholm, I think.
Yes.
But yeah, so if you watch the replay of it,
yes,
if the puck goes in off of PD, we don't know there's a goal called there.
Yeah,
but thankfully it didn't go in off of PD. It was a bat shot, according to the NHL, from JT Miller.
Yeah, it was kind of funny. I don't think his feet moved in any way that you could describe as a kicking motion,
you don't.
But we don't want to get into that territory.
Yeah, also voodoo.
Also voodoo, and it was quite funny because Pedersen didn't know it went off JT even, so he was trying to bury it one more time.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Hey.
It was a wild moment.
It was. And, you think, hey, 33 seconds left in the third period. Vancouver's got this one in the bag, right? No.
Not
I mean,
necessarily.
okay, they got the win, but those 33 seconds were full on squeaky bum time. Like Sir Alex Ferguson, if he was watching, he would have declared that squeaky bum time.
For sure. It was maybe not quite as bad as Game 6 in the National Series, but pretty close.
It was pretty close.
I screamed the white spot down when the goal went in, and that is not a euphemism. I was in white spot. Random place to be watching the game, I grant you. That's where I was. And
Wanted a Nats lager or whatever it is.
I had a spiked milkshake and it was so good, but I couldn't move for 4 to 6 hours afterwards. So,
Yeah.
But yeah, my buddy that was with me took my pulse after the goal.
Okay, so that's a thing?
Well, I don't have a fancy watch, Chris. So,
Is your buddy a doctor or a medical professional?
in fact, he's an editor. But stands
Totally.
surviving, at least.
Yeah, totally sufficient credentials to take pulses.
But-
I mean, let's be honest. Anyone could take a pulse, but what it actually means, how
I mean, I almost
Anyhow,
failed
so-
my first aid on that, but yes. It was going pretty fast, and then I was shaking too much at the end for him to take my pulse. So, yes, the last 33 seconds were not good.
Canucks do get the win, though, and that puts them up 3-2 with the chance to go to Edmonton and win Game 6. I talked to so many people who are like, I think I got a feeling the Canucks are going to do it on Saturday. They're going to go to Edmonton. They're going to win Game 6. And I'm like, I'm not that confident. I had a couple Oiler fans who told me I didn't like the body language of the Oilers in Vancouver. Like looked defeated. Look at Vancouver wanted to win. And the moment Vancouver wanted to win, there was absolutely nothing Edmonton could do. You just knew it was going to happen. And I'm like, no, I'm still not that confident. I wish I was as confident as you as a defeated Oilers fan. And when news broke that Pickard wasn't actually going to start Game 6, that they were going to go back to Stuart Skinner, I was like, oh, okay. Well, then I'm
A little more
kind of thinking Vancouver has a chance here.
Yeah, for sure.
Um,
No, go ahead.
So Game 6 gets underway, and you could tell that both Vancouver and Edmonton were playing the game, at least in the early going, not to lose. Now, Edmonton got themselves into some penalty trouble early, but that's okay because, they know Vancouver's power play is somewhat anemic, but Vancouver was actually, throwing the puck around through lanes, getting it through. But did you know that just passing the puck crisply does not score goals in it?
Yeah, I think I might have noticed this and remarked upon this during the season, but you actually don't get points during the season, and you don't get goals in the playoffs for nice passes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the Canucks got one shot on their first power play. In fact, they had a 2-man advantage, and they got I think one shot over the full 2-man advantage. It was absolutely surreal that the Vancouver Canucks could not get pucks on Skinner. I talked about this in the Nashville series where I was like, I just wish Vancouver would get pucks on the net so that the goaltender can have a great game and you can say, yeah, look, Vancouver did everything they could. Goaltender was the one who stood on his head. Skinner did not stand on his head.
Nope.
In fact, the Vancouver Canucks mustered 15 shots throughout the game. To put things into comparison, they had 11 shots in one period in Game 5.
Yeah.
And Stuart Skinner, who's shown that he has been somewhat fallible in net,
Yeah,
got a night off
despite
almost.
facing a high shot volume. Yeah, it's total free pass, I think, from Vancouver. Very much felt like, especially as the game went on, that they just rolled over and gave up. There's like obvious like defensive stuff I didn't like. Obviously, like Ian Cole.
Well, what about the Dylan Holloway goal where he got to skate from one end of the ice to the other, and the Vancouver Canucks simply parted ways
Like
to
the
allow
Red
him
Sea.
free reign?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't want to take away, like Dylan Holloway, it was a great wrist shot to score that goal. But he went through at least 4 Vancouver Canucks who were within stick distance of him, and he saw no stick tap.
Yeah. It seemed like just complete lack of not desperation, but just like fight energy, just missed opportunity. Like you say, like if you're peppering the goalie with shots and Skinner somehow pulls a performance out his butt to play well and save the game. Great, okay, like you tried.
But he didn't have to.
No.
I don't I genuinely don't recall him making a lights out save in that game. The same can't be said for Silas, who is relied on to make lights out saves in every game that he plays, because the Vancouver Canucks philosophy of defense is we have a good goaltender, we think. So, it's definitely a whole different approach. But despite this inaction and this Vancouver Canucks offense that seemed to have taken the night off or forgotten that they had a game, the Niels Höglander goal was a pretty goal. Petey setting him up from behind the net. Höglander scores. And again, at the end of the first period, I would have to think, if you're the Oilers, you're like, what are we going to do to put this team away? They just keep sticking around. They keep it close. They do absolutely nothing. Something goes their way. What are we going to do? Well, they figured it out. Score a lot of goals.
Yeah. Doesn't seem like it was, that hard in the end. But, Niels Höglander had some good moments. Connor Garland, once again, he doesn't give up for sure.
Oh, no.
And Shilov's, this is not to take away from his effort because...
Hey, what did you appreciate about Silovs in the first 2 minutes of the first period when he decided to go on a little adventure?
I don't like his adventures. He's done it quite a few times in this series.
Yeah, he hasn't been punished yet. So
Exactly.
as far as he's
That's a
concerned,
problem.
he's good at the adventure game.
And obviously it was very fun when he came very, far out for the desperation.
Poke check?
Poke check.
Yeah, it was 2 games earlier.
Yeah, game 4, so that was fun. But I don't like his going on adventures. I trust Shilovs as a shot stopper. That's hard to say. Shilovs as a shot stopper. But his puck handling is not good.
Well,
at least it's not playoff speed good.
It's not, but at least his puck handling isn't what cost the Vancouver Canucks either goals or high. Well, I mean, there were maybe some scoring opportunities, but Edmonton couldn't maximize on it.
But no goals as of yet.
Second period rolls around, and the Edmonton Oilers start throwing every possible puck they can get from pretty solid, shooting lanes towards Silas. Silas continues to make great saves, but you can only stop as many pucks as possible before they finally find a way through you. Both the Zach Hyman and Evan Bouchard goals, I don't fault Silas on either. Yes, I think it was the Hyman goal that hit him in the shoulder and sort of bounced back.
Yeah.
You could say, well, he has to have that. Well, I mean, he had made the initial save. It got him high. But those goals are going to happen, right? It happens. Bouchard scores, and you're feeling like, oh man, this isn't good. But see, Edmonton got a little eager. Well, actually, I should sort of rewind a bit. Vancouver first got eager, when Connor Garland got that roughing call against Brent Kulak, which I felt bad for Garland because Garland was essentially mugged on the sideboards, but of course his retaliation would get called. And then Dakota Joshua gets called for high sticking because the boy doesn't have his stick on the ice. He's got it up shoulder high and taps Hyman. That gets called. And so when the Vancouver Canucks were down 2 men, I'm like, oh, well, Edmonton's going to score here. And once it's 4-1, it's game over. Vancouver, however, kills that penalty off. Edmonton got, I think, 2 chances on the 5-on-3 that you could say were high quality, but Vancouver played really well. Tyler Myers was on the ice for about 12 minutes straight or something like that. Like, he was the defenseman for the entire 2-minute power play. And then when it went to even strength, the Canucks, I think, iced it a couple times, so he didn't actually get off the ice. But when Edmonton goes and starts getting themselves into some penalty trouble with the Derek Ryan hooking penalty and JT Miller, and then too many men, which apparently Edmonton knows how to take those too. I thought it was just a Vancouver Canucks thing. How many shots do you think Vancouver got on a 2-man advantage late in the second period and a penalty that carried over into the third?
I mean, you'd think quite a lot. What a great opportunity to get back into the game, Chris.
You'd think, right? You'd think that. They got 0. They got 0 shots over the course of more than 2 minutes. The minute 12 was the sort of duration of the end of the period. Well, actually, let me do the math. Okay, so it would have been a minute. A minute 4 would have been maybe less than a minute. Okay, regardless. The point is, they had a darn minute to have 2-man advantage. They don't get any shots on net. I don't know how that's even possible. And yet Vancouver does not get anything. The penalty carries into the third period and no shots. Granted, Edmonton wins the initial faceoff. But the scary part is the best opportunity during those 2 minutes was the Oilers.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so frustrating. I feel that kind of deflated the Canucks because as they went into the third period, they did pick up their game slightly. But Edmonton didn't rest on their laurels. Edmonton brought game. And when Nuge scored to put them up 4-1, I'm like, wind a turd. It's over. Evander Kane scores late in the third. Game is really over. And now we are going on to Game 7.
I mean, why are you so damn beat, Chris? We always said Canucks in 7. It's just the fulfillment of the
I know.
And
I know.
Ryan Escock,
I didn't.
the only ESPN analyst to pick us, also said Canucks in 7. So it is the prophecy.
I said this on Threads. At the start of the series, I said Canucks in 7. When we recorded last week, I said Canucks in 7. And after they lost Game 6, I'm like, maintain the faith, Canucks in 7. I would have been more than fine to have been proven wrong and had the Canucks win in 6. They didn't have to go in and ensure that my prognostication is the one that is correct, Anna. We don't need to be proven right. We can be proven wrong with the team beating Edmonton in a series that very few people gave them hope. We're a hometown podcast, and yes, we said the Canucks were going to win this series, but it's not like we felt good about it.
No, it's true. And I did feel like during the week, I was like, well, that was pretty negative of us. Canucks have a chance to win it in 6 here. What are we saying?
Oh, but here we are going into Game 7. Vancouver, Edmonton, for all the marbles, with no Brock Boeser. Brock Boeser being out of Game 7, I think, is a big blow to the Canucks. He has been an offensive threat on the ice. He has, that wicked snapshot when on the half boards, or we did see that sort of rotation in the power play where he started to play nearer to the point with Quinn swapping down to the half boards. Yeah. I don't know how you insert someone else into the lineup to take that spot. Yet, I'm going to ask you this, Anna. Tell me how out to lunch I am.
Okay.
Do you put Petey into Brock's spot?
So are you talking about on the power play or just in the lineup?
In the lineup.
I mean, that's a good line right there, talking about good line mates. I do think,
it creates a hole that you then have to
I don't know if that's, necessarily the right move. Sorry, that was my phone dropping on the floor.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I've seen Harvey the cat. I haven't heard him, but
Yeah, he's asleep now. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's an out to lunch take. I just think that, like, Petey's refound himself a little bit, but I wouldn't say, like, his game is in a good enough place to just shift him anywhere. So.
Well, who do you place in that spot on the first line?
I mean, kind of.
Do you elevate Garland?
Maybe. Like, you have to pick a kind of multi-tool player, right? Because it's not good.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to match Brock Boeser in terms of, like, pure skill. So it has to be more like a multifaceted player. I mean, Connor Garland may be the guy.
I mean,
It's just
if you elevate Connor Garland,
yeah.
right, you conceivably would be inserting, someone into what would be your energy line. But the Garland line has been playing well,
Yes.
and that sort of there's disruption here, and I feel that line has some synergy. The PD line hasn't. I mean, yes, we've seen PD start to reemerge. But even with Lindholm and Höglander, outside of that one goal, there really hasn't been anything more. So are you really disrupting that line in its entirety, moving PD up? But we also have to consider, do PD and JT mesh? I feel Garland and JT mesh more.
Yes. Agreed. And this is not a reflection on PD and JT as, like, buddies. Like, clearly they're not best buds, but they can...
Their play style.
Yes, their play style does not. And, like, we've seen the Lotto line. It can work, but I think the Lotto line does not work without Brock Boeser. It's not like
No.
it's a three-person line, and I haven't seen it working in a little bit, so...
Yeah.
I think Connor Garland offers you a better chance, and I think you do have to give up the third line, that energy line, for that.
So Podkolzin would be the one who would insert into either a Garland or a PD spot. Agreed?
Yes.
Yeah. Man, see, to me, that's the tougher decision. Goaltending, it's Seeloff's. It's not the Smith.
Like,
it's not
about
Demko.
it.
It's Seeloff's.
Yeah.
There's someone had on social had suggested it should be Demko. If he's even taking pucks, you throw Demko in.
I think that's an insane.
We don't know the state of the injury. We know it was significant enough for him to essentially miss every game since game one. And now you're going to throw him in. Like, I don't feel Shilos has done anything to say that he's not your goaltender. Yeah, they hung 5 on him in game 6. He is not the reason they hung 5 on him.
Yeah.
Like, they could have hung 2 on him and that would have been sufficient.
Yeah.
Right? Like the Canucks offense was just non-existent in game 6. So Silas and net, someone goes and plays up in the first line with JT. And Anna, am I reading this right? Are you going to be at the rink?
I am.
Okay, Anna, we're going to make it known that if they don't, for some weird reason, pull this out, that not only is Axel's toque cursed,
Yeah.
but you might be cursed too.
So
There's a lot of pressure on you, Anna.
I am going to watch it with Hillary, who is...
Who's Hillary? Do I know Hillary?
I don't think so. But
Okay.
Hillary, I went to Game 3 viewing party with. She was a good omen then. She was also hosted us for the Nashville game where we came back to win it in overtime. So
Okay. So what I'm hearing is if they lose, it's your fault, and if they win, it's Hillary's. Not fault. It's not a fault if you win.
But-
It's all on Hillary for a win and all on you for a loss. Got it.
Hillary was
Noted.
also there yesterday. So
Oh, Well, Did she get a toque too? Because maybe it's those toques that are cursed. Light them on fire.
No, we were just at a bar on Main Street, so I don't know. Maybe it's the tacos that are cursed. I'm not sure.
All right. Canucks in 7.
Canucks in 7.
So you heard it here first. Man, you probably heard it elsewhere, but you heard it here first. You're listening to the C4 Canucks Hockey Podcast, brought to you by Anna and Chris.
Take hitting out of the game. You can't hit anymore, so don't do it.
The unsportsmanlike conduct, I want to get an explanation on that.
No kidding.
Because how do you get suspended for unsportsmanlike conduct?
Plus interference. There's no interference there. He had the puck.
Now, Madison never ever did that before. Now, why did he do it? That because he was mad.
Well, your early favorite for the Calder Trophy, that's for sure. Elias Pettersson, you might even say your early favorite for the Hart Trophy.
Just to get back to your question, Elias is going to play plenty. He didn't play. He's going to get a lot of power play time. And, yeah, I'm concerned about our offense. We lost 200-point players, and we've got to find a way to score.
Taking a quick glance at the rest of the league, we already told you. Everyone else is watching the end of this Edmonton Oilers-Vancouver Canucks series. But if we do a quick recap of how we got to where we are right now, the Dallas Stars, I was going to say, made short work of the Colorado Avalanche. Well, no, they didn't. They won in 6. But that said, the Avs potentially could have been out in 5. And
yeah, I do think the beginning of the series, I was feeling pretty confident about my Avs in 7 call, and I was thinking, yeah, Dallas are play better hockey, but Avs has been here before. Yeah. They'll make that experience.
Stars win the next 3.
Oh, never mind. I'm happy to see wrong.
And they win the next 3 in pretty convincing fashion. Credit to the Avalanche, though, for putting up a hell of a fight in Game 6. They forced the Stars to score 2 goals in overtime to win it.
Yeah, exactly. Voodoo.
If you haven't seen the first goal that Dallas scored, which was ruled no goal due to goaltender interference, I mean, the TNT broadcast panel, Henrik Lundqvist, charter member of the goaltender union, was a firm believer that it was goaltending interference. I don't know which star was in front of Georgiev, but he's not in the blue paint. They're arguing, well, his butt kind of floated by the blue paint. The goaltender is the one who initiates the contact by coming out of the blue paint, and then the Dallas Stars pushed in towards him. That was a good goal. Like, I don't understand how it was interference, but because the ruling on the ice was no goal, it has to be then definitively the other direction for it to be a good goal. That said, Dallas goes on and doesn't get robbed, scores, eliminates the Avs. They're waiting for the winner of the Stars Canucks, which, as you heard from us earlier, the Canucks, knock on wood, salt over the shoulder. I don't know what other things I have to do. Light Axel's toque on fire.
I don't want to get ahead of myself, but the thought of playing the Dallas Stars is effing terrifying.
Yeah. Out east, the New York Rangers got past the Carolina Hurricanes in similar fashion. They get past the Hurricanes in 6. What's interesting about this is the Canes had a chance in Game 6 to potentially force Game 7. The problem was that they didn't realize the game was 3 periods long.
That's the rub. Yep. That'll happen.
Yeah, it happens. It happens, and it just happened in an unfortunate game 1 as to which they got eliminated. They had a 2-0 lead. Trocheck goes and makes it 2-1. Aho goes and makes it 3-1. And Carolina, for the most part, had carried the play both in the second and the third. But they could not stop Chris Kreider from going and scoring twice to tie it up. And then when Kreider scores a 3rd goal, natural hat trick to take the lead, it was like kaboom.
Yeah. I do think, considering that I think Rangers are a much better team than Carolina have held their own in this series at even strength. But at even strength is pretty key there.
Yeah. And then the other series in the East, you had the Florida Panthers and the Boston Bruins. Again, Boston, they win Game 1. They then lose the next 3. They happen to go and win Game 5 to force Game 6. But Boston, despite scoring the first goal, did not have the temerity to shut down a Florida Panthers team that was righteously pissed off for reasons. And ultimately, Florida wins 2-1. Though the officiating, in fairness, I shouldn't say for reasons. The officiating was clearly in a direction that was not conducive to you as a Bruins fan.
Yeah, and, like, obviously there's been some, like, pretty terrible moments, especially, like, no supplemental discipline for 18-year-old, 30-year-old Sam Bennett. Like, that was crazy. But on the other hand, like, Boston Payne is just, you know, just good nourishment, manna from heaven for Canucks fans. So, yeah. Good guys win.
So not Edmonton, but New York and Florida, they take each other on in the East. Winner of that series goes on the Stanley Cup final. Who you got coming out of the East, Anna?
New York.
See, I want to say New York, and I would have had I not seen what Carolina was able to accomplish late in that series and in Game 6, arguably. I'm giving it to Florida. Florida's got a taste. Now, New York's a great team. I mean, I feel for whoever comes out of the West. I mean, we know it's the Canucks.
Right.
Right,
definitely.
Canucks in 7. But yeah, I'm thinking Florida comes out of the East.
Interesting. I just think, I know what you're saying, but I think, like Dallas, it's kind of, they've had a good team for quite a while, and I think eventually that better hockey will show, even though Florida might be the tougher team and have more grit. I do think, the better team will show, and we'll see. But, I mean, did you see the stat? Like, if Canucks make out the series, it'll be the first time ever that conference final winners, the conference final participants, are the division winners.
No, did not know that.
Isn't that wild?
I would have thought it would have happened to at least once before. I mean, the NHL has had some, funky divisions in the past.
Yeah.
But
and they've had 4 divisions, I think, since the 70s. So
yeah, but they used to reseed, right? And
right,
reseeding
it does mess with it.
would potentially force you to, as a good team, to play a potentially better team because of the reseeding. I mean, let me rephrase it. Maybe not the better team, but a team that, doesn't line up as well to you. Anyhow, regardless. Other NHL news, Toronto has a new coach. Craig Berube will be the next coach to lead the team to the first round exit.
Rob Brind'Amour got re-upped in Carolina.
Yep, in Carolina. Oh, Selke Trophy was announced, which I can't remember who won because it wasn't a Canuck. There we go. Yeah. But, and the Marc Messier Leadership Trophy, the one trophy that is voted on by one person, namely Marc Messier.
Yeah, obviously we're insanely biased, but, like, how is that a good setup?
Well, see, I did not know this until PJ was the one, friend of the show, Patrick Johnston, had shared that. And because having his name on the award, I mean, that actually didn't short circuit me. Like, yeah, okay. I mean, as much as we have problems with Mess, he seemed to be a good leader in Edmonton and New York. So, okay. But the fact that he's the guy who decides is batshit.
Yeah. I presumed he had something to do with that. I don't think I was aware that he was deciding, so.
He was the voting party?
Yeah, absolutely wild. But, we'll see what comes down with the other awards.
Yeah. Anyhow, Anna, it's been a slice. We're going to be back next week, obviously. I mean, we could be talking about the outcome of the current series and what might be happening in the next one. We could be, commiserating over a pint. It could be me hosting the show with a new podcast host because I'm so pissed off about the Anna Forsyth curse. I mean, there's a lot that could happen between now and our next episode.
Yeah. I mean, I hope we're still living the dizzy dream of the playoffs, but we shall see.
We shall see. Speaking of seeing things, if you happen to go to our website, c4podcast.com, it works again. It's changing-ish, but, it works again. That's a good sign. You can also connect with us on social media at the C4 Podcast on what apparently is now X. Everything's forwarding to X. And then at the Real C4 Podcast on Threads. When you talk to us, the likelihood is you're going to engage with Anna on X. You're going to engage with me on Threads. We sort of have, I'd like to say we strategically divvied up the social media platforms, but I've just given up on the Bird site.
And I've given up on understanding Threads. Every time I go on, I'm just like, what is happening over here?
Fair. But you can find us on either of those platforms. You can also join Discord, discord.io/C4podcast, where we have to talk about Axel's Kirstook, among other things. For instance, Axel's food. A lot of Axel posts. He's single-handedly keeping our community alive. No, you can talk about, how I pointed out the Major League Soccer goes and shares video reviews of referees within the VAR process. And then the Referees Association will actually declare whether or not the referee got VAR correct. I'm not bitter that they found that the referee in a Vancouver Whitecaps match got the call wrong. But hey, I wish the NHL were to have that level of transparency with, officials, especially, not to name anyone specific like Kelly Sutherland, but, some form of transparency. And if you've reached this point of the show and you're like, hey, Anna and Chris, they've put on a good season. I wish I could buy them a beverage or something. Well, you can by going to buymeacoffee.com/C4podcast or a website that Anna and I like to call. And you can throw a couple of bucks our way. We'll use that money to go and buy a pint or two. Alternatively, you can support us on a monthly or annual basis. And those who support us annually get one of the exclusive C4 Canucks Hockey Podcast stickers that you can only find if I mail it to you or out of the hundreds of people walking around the UK because Anna had a buttload that she took with her there. Very exclusive. But any final words of wisdom this week, Anna?
Cats are cute. I'm just looking at a cat that's all tucked up and asleep. So, if you have a pet, appreciate your pet, love on your pet, please. Thank you.
Okay. My final words of wisdom: remember to breathe. The game isn't over until it's over, and as it always is, win deterred. If you know, you know. On behalf of Anna, A4C03, myself, Chris at Lightforce, I'm signing off this episode of the C4 Canucks Hockey Podcast with We Out.